In this lesson, we will talk about the character encoding in HTML. What is character encoding? To be able to display the HTML page correctly, we need to set the proper character encoding. For example, we have different speaking languages in the world, and with every different languages, we have different letters and characters. So it might happen that the browser by default can read and write the character you have in the page. So to read it and write it correctly, we need to set the proper character encoding. The first character encoding standard in HTML was ASCII. ASCII defined 127 different alphanumeric characters. In Windows, the character encoding standard was called ANSI, which supported 256 different encoding characters. In HTML4, the standard was ISO 88591, which was an extension to ASCII, which supported 256 different encoding characters. But ASCII and ISO 88591 were too limited, especially for characters from not so popular languages. So characters from those languages were missing in the standards. So the default encoding standard was switched to Unicode in HTML5, also known as UTF-8. To set the character encoding in HTML, we need to use the charSet attribute in the meta element. Like I said before, the head elements are first loaded, so the engine in this case must know what character encoding it needs to use before the body and all the text is loaded and rendered. For character encoding, it is highly recommended to use Unicode. To set the character encoding to Unicode, insert a meta element in the head element with the attribute charSet, which is short for character set, and set the value to UTF-8, which is the Unicode encoding. So now the browser engine will use the Unicode to encode the characters in the HTML page. Also, it is a good practice of writing the meta element as first element in the head element, so that the character encoding is set right away. But because the Unicode encoding is default in HTML5, you don't need to set the meta element. But many developers, even if they use HTML5 in their web page, they still include the charSet meta element. That's because it may happen that the browser's engine uses different encoding than Unicode, so it's a good thing to set the charSet in the meta element. But to set the charSet encoding in HTML4, we can't use the charset meta element. Instead, we need to use another meta element, but this time, instead of the charset attribute, we need to use two attributes, and those are the HTTP equip, in which we need to set the value to content type, and the content attribute, where we need to set the value to text / HTML semicolon charset equal, and then the encoding, in this case UTF-8, which is the Unicode encoding. So it's a good practice to include both meta elements to ensure maximum compatibility. So that's all in this tutorial lesson about the character encoding in HTML.